Two Welsh police constables caught knocking boots and handed their P45s. Multiple Metropolitan police constables faced misconduct or court proceedings this week. 17 victims of sexual assault may not get any justice after an administrative error. Police using roadside vehicle checks as an excuse to question you about whether you're breaking COVID restrictions. And Met Police custody sergeant shot dead. But who's really at risk? Them or us? This and more coming up. If you want to see more of these reports, please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you appreciate the work I do, please consider joining the channel Patreon for as little as just £3 a month, which will help me continue providing this content. Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name's Dan. Welcome back to another PAP Reports. It's Saturday, 26th of September 2020. And this is our roundup of what we've missed the past few days while I've been away. And boy, do we have a lot to get through. In PAP Reports on the 22nd of September, we spoke about two police constables from Gwent Police, only identified at the time as Ms B and Mr A, in the police's ever-increasing attempts to be transparent. Well, now the misconduct hearing is over, we have some names and faces, and I have to say that I'd probably have let Miss B give me a notch too. Ms B, now known to be 32-year-old Zoe Phillips, and Mr A, now known to be married 35-year-old Andrew Perry, were rumbled after anonymous calls to the police, which were backed up by police vehicle GPS systems, showing that they had been in the same secluded locations on multiple occasions when they had no policing purpose to be there or to be together. It later came to light that these two constables were meeting to knock boots whilst on duty. Their misconduct hearing commenced earlier this week, where the panel heard that anonymous phone calls were made to Gwent Police alleging that PC Phillips and PC Perry were meeting in remote locations whilst on duty and at PC Perry's home address for the purposes of a sexual relationship. The investigating officer obtained GPS Tetra mapping data to show the likely whereabouts of Perry and Phillips in relation to each other whilst they were on duty. The hearing was told that the data revealed that the two were together on large number of occasions when there was no policing reason for doing so. In an interview, PC Perry admitted that there would be kissing and cuddling when they were both on duty. The pair also met up at PC Phillips's house for sex whilst PC Perry was on duty. Perry admitted that two allegations against him amounted to gross misconduct, whereas Phillips admitted meeting with Perry while he was on duty and to sending a sexualised photograph to him while on duty, but denied sexual contact with him whilst on duty and argues that her action amounted only to misconduct rather than gross misconduct. Well, the hearing is now over, and as much as PC Zoe Phillips would have liked for her story to have been believed, the panel decided that both constables were cretinous and found all allegations against them proven, with PC Andrew Perry's two allegations against him amounting to gross misconduct and PC Zoe Phillips' allegation against her of sex on duty found to be gross misconduct, but sending an X-rated picture whilst on duty only amounted to misconduct. Both cretinous constables were handed their P45s and reminded not to let the door hit them on the way out of the sty. In PAP Reports on the 29th of April, we spoke about how Norfolk police were searching for a man who was spotted taking his daily walk whilst wearing a 17th century plague doctor's costume in Helsden near Norwich, suggesting that locals were terrified and Norfolk police wanted to speak to the shadowy figure to give words of advice. And we all know what that means. Threats of arrest for upsetting people's fee-fees. Well, it seems another plague doctor has appeared, this time in Stankbridge, Gloucester, and yet again, police want to speak to the figure to offer words of advice over the appropriateness of his outfit. One woman called Chloe from Coney Hill said, "I was there chilling at the duck pond on Sunday and I saw a man when I was walking on top of the bridge. He was talking to the kids and one child ran off because they were so scared. The group of children were very young and small. The one who ran off must have been about 10 years old." Well, let's hope you don't have any children, Chloe, seeing as Halloween is literally just around the corner now. What next? A ban on Halloween costumes? A Gloucestershire police spokesperson said, "We are aware an individual has been seen wearing medieval style costumes in and around Gloucester. While it is not an offence to dress in this way, we will be looking to speak to the individual to give words of advice on the appropriateness of the costume at this time." Well, Gloucestershire police, maybe you should simply stick to what you're paid to do and uphold the law dealing with actual criminal offences, leaving people who are not committing those offences alone and stop trying to create offences out of thin air. Just a thought. West Mercia Police and Crime Commissioner John Campion is pressing the Home Office to allow him to take over control of the Fire and Rescue Service, along with his current oversight of the police. West Mercia Police, Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service and Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue Service are currently governed and funded separately, which they should be, as they're completely separate organisations. But in 2017, Police and Crime Commissioner John Campion submitted a business case to the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd, arguing that £4 million worth of annual savings could be made through a single governance. And no doubt some of that £4 million hopes to get its way into your back pocket. Rudd approved the plan initially, but a judicial review by the fire authorities questioned her decision-making process and delayed implementation. The Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner told the Force Areas Police and Crime Panel he still believes in the essence of what I pitched for 3 years ago applies, but said if re-elected he would look at the issue afresh in light of proposed new laws and the findings of a Home Office review. Responding to a question from panel member Kuldip Shahuta, a Telford and Wrekin council member, Campion said, "This isn't about me." No, of course it isn't. I am agnostic who governs fire service. What I want is the best service for our community, and if someone else is going to do that and it stacks up, I'm supportive. Yeah, of course you are. I think the question I'm picking out is, do I still believe the essence of what I pitched for 3 years ago is still there, he said. I do. Some of it has been progressed because the two fire and rescue authorities, Shropshire Fire and Rescue Service and Hereford and Worcester Fire and Rescue Service, have started working with each other. So for me, driving together the two services to deliver greater efficiency and effectiveness, I think, is in the interest of the public we serve, and indeed the hard-working men and women, volunteer or paid, who also make up those fire services. Now, although this might be good for saving a little money on governance of the services, we know full well that the money saved will unlikely be used to improve the services. Rather, it will be used to line the pockets of those who feel they deserve a pay rise, like the Police and Crime Commissioner. A PCC's role is supposed to be the voice of the people, a supposedly publicly elected official to hold the police chiefs to account. And we're still waiting for that to happen. Police and Crime Commissioners are supposed to cut crime and help deliver an effective and efficient police service within their force area. And we're still waiting for that to happen too. But let's for a moment pretend that Police and Crime Commissioners are anything else than false gestures to the public to make the public feel that more is being done within the police. How the hell would a Police and Crime Commissioner have the first idea about how to run a fire service? Clearly two vastly different organisations which would require two completely different approaches to manage. Let's also look at the fact that there is still way more for Police and Crime Commissioners to do within the police forces to eradicate corruption and bring policing back in line with the fundamental principles of policing by actually holding the police chiefs to account for their actions or non-actions. In fact, I can't think of a single example of a member of the Fire and Rescue Service that I've had to report on in 8 months of daily reports. They are rarely in the news for anything other than doing their jobs and for saving lives without prejudice. Something we can't exactly say the same for police. In its judicial review, the fire authorities argued Ms Rudd hadn't examined the public safety implications of the proposed governance merger closely enough and considered the efficiency and effectiveness that would result from a planned move altogether rather than individually. Mr Justice Garnham found against the fire authorities, concluding Ms Rudd had taken account of public safety and, while she hadn't applied the test properly, she would have arrived at the same decision had she done so. Reacting to that decision in 2019, Shropshire and Wrekin Fire and Rescue Authority Chairman Eric Carter said they had lost on a technicality and still didn't accept the business case. He said that other areas of the country have seen fire and police governance merge, but these were areas with a failing service beforehand, whereas Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services has rated Shropshire's Fire Brigade as good. So what do you think? I mean, personally, I think having a PCC oversight of the fire service would be a waste of time, considering the lack of knowledge in the organisation. I think the money saved will be argued by the PCC that he deserves a cut-off, to pay him more wages rather than improve the services. Seeing as, like I said a moment ago, Police and Crime Commissioners, although are supposed to hold Chief Constables to account, actually seem to fail in that in every instance. In fact, for me, although Police and Crime Commissioners are supposedly publicly elected, for them it's pretty much all about the money rather than actually taking the right action against the police when they balls up. Maybe if they were not paid as much as they are, or maybe if it was a voluntary panel of people, we would see far more done because they would be doing it for the right reasons rather than for the pay packet. Metropolitan Police Constable PC Sam Wiltshire from the Met's East Area Command Unit has been handed his marching orders after a misconduct hearing this week. Wiltshire was accused of sending text messages containing threats of violence to his ex-partner and her family, as well as messages deemed as grossly offensive or indecent. The panel found these allegations to be proven at gross misconduct level, and Wiltshire was dismissed without notice. However, there doesn't seem to be any information as to whether he is being charged or has been charged with malicious communications or any other crime for that matter. Metropolitan Police Constable PC Rachid Taghelite from the Met Central West Command Unit was handed his marching orders too after his misconduct hearing this week. Taghelite faced allegations that he breached the standards of professional behaviour in respect of authority, respect and courtesy, duties and responsibilities, equality and diversity, honesty and integrity and discreditable conduct. A full house! After it was alleged that in February 2018, whilst at the home address of a victim of crime, PC Taghelite failed to behave in a compassionate or empathetic manner, failed to consider the victim may have been vulnerable, and failed to investigate and accurately record the complaint. He was also found to have helped himself to food at the property that he was searching in March 2018 without permission from the homeowner. The panel found that Taghelite had breached the standards of professional behaviour in respect of authority, respect and courtesy, duties and responsibilities, integrity and discreditable conduct to the level of gross misconduct, and was shown the door with his P45 in hand. An IOPC investigation into two police constables from the Metropolitan Police concluded that PC Jack Wood, based at East Area Command Unit, and PC Archie Payne, also based at East Area Command Unit, should face criminal charges for assault, an assessment which clearly the CPS agreed with. Metropolitan Police made a referral to the IOPC following receipt of a complaint from a member of the public who had sustained an injury during an incident with the police in Romford on Sunday the 5th January 2020. Wood was subsequently charged with assault occasioning actual bodily harm, Section 47 Offences Against the Person Act 1861 and Common Assault Section 39 Criminal Justice Act 1988. And Payne was also charged with Common Assault Section 39 Criminal Justice Act 1988. Both constables appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court on Friday the 25th of September and will now appear at Hendon Magistrates Court on February the 4th, 2021 for a trial. Another Metropolitan Police Constable, PC Antony Pearce from the Southwark and Lambeth branch of the Met, would have been sacked if he hadn't already left the police on January the 25th in order to save himself from disciplinary action. Pearce had been arrested on July the 20th, 2019 for drink driving. The following month he pleaded guilty at Hastings Magistrate Court to driving a vehicle whilst over the drink drive limit, where he was convicted of driving a motor vehicle whilst exceeding the prescribed limit of alcohol. At the time, the court ordered him to pay a £390 fine, a victim surcharge of £50 and banned him from holding a driving licence for 20 months. The misconduct panel found that Pearce's actions amounted to gross misconduct and that had he still been serving, he would have been dismissed. For all the good that does now he's left. Now might be a very good time to avoid contact with the police. With multiple constables in Manchester allegedly self-isolating due to coronavirus, police at Wiltshire Police Station and Drylor Police Station in Edinburgh, and other outbreaks in police forces across the UK, we have another this time at Thames Valley Police. Thames Valley Police have been quick to point out that the constables affected are from the Berkshire area and that Milton Keynes and Buckinghamshire constables are allegedly not affected. But you know what? Unless you start telling your constables to follow the rules themselves when dealing with the public, then it might not be long before they are all affected. Gold Commander for Thames Valley Police's response to coronavirus, Assistant Chief Constable Christian Bunt, said following his positive test within the West Berkshire local policing area, the officers are taking precautions and are self-isolating after it was confirmed they tested positive for coronavirus. Early action was taken to ensure that these officers isolated quickly in order to minimise the spread of the virus. This is not having any impact on the service we provide to the public or the abuse of powers you inflict on them. Plans continue to be in place and contain and manage this situation, and we continue to work in partnership with Public Health England and West Berkshire Council. A Police Scotland constable has been made a scapegoat this week after being fined for failing to self-isolate after he returned from a trip to Dubai. 28-year-old PC Robert Isaacs was said to have returned from his trip to the United Arab Emirates, which was not an exempt country at the time, before returning to work, when he should have self-isolated for 14 days. However, Isaacs returned to work the very next day. PC Isaacs was then hit with a £480 fine for breaking the quarantine measures, but will not face further disciplinary charges. Fellow constables are said to have thought he was in Blackpool on holiday, but Isaacs posted on Facebook saying he was heading to La Mer shopping centre in Dubai on August the 31st. Police Scotland Chief Superintendent Mark Sutherland confirmed a 28-year-old man had been hit with a fine over breached quarantine rules. He said, "For those who choose to breach the regulations and risk the health of others, we will not hesitate to take enforcement action where appropriate." Now, although it's nice to see the police being treated the same way they treat the public, I can't help but think this is a scapegoat scenario. It's not a sackable offence, so it's not really a criminal offence, so Isaac won't see any real repercussions from his actions. But what it does do is cleverly show that the police are taking action against their own, although they're still letting the serious offenders get away with far too much. A technical change in law in Northern Ireland has seen 17 victims of sex offences faced with the prospect of no justice, as prosecutors are applying for 15 convictions for the offences to be binned. The Public Prosecution Service is contacting 17 victims of assault after it emerged that the offences should not have been pursued through the Magistrates' Court. Magistrates' Court convictions of 15 individuals for certain sexual offences between 2009 and 2017 are said to be set aside or rescinded as a result of what the PPS are calling a legislative error, which caused them to be invalid. Now, a case that's set aside does not necessarily mean it's over. Unlike an acquittal, a set aside is used to overturn a decision based on a review of the case. For example, a CCJ could be imposed on you due to you not knowing about the county court hearing. You could then be given a CCJ for not attending and the corporate court finding in favour of the debt company. You could then get that CCJ set aside under certain circumstances, whilst you collect evidence to prove your case that you don't deserve a CCJ. Now, I know that sex offences and CCJs are vastly different, but the explanation is still relevant. It's believed the error came to light in 2018, but the victims are only now being told following a scoping exercise in which lawyers established how many cases could be affected. The new legislation dealing with sex offences introduced in 2009 unintentionally removed a number of offences from a list of cases that could be prosecuted in the Magistrates' Court. A review of the situation identified that the issue had affected 15 cases in which there were 17 victims. PPS lawyers will now make the application to rescind convictions involving 14 victims where the relevant offence was indecent assault on a female, contrary section 52 of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861. One victim where the relevant offence was indecent assault on a male, contrary to section 62 of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861. Two further cases where a relevant offence was unlawful carnal knowledge, contrary to section 5.1 of the Criminal Law Amendment Act 1885. The Public Prosecution Service says they have worked with victim support, put in place a support package for the 17 victims affected. And I'm sure that'll help them feel just like justice has been served, especially when some of the victims were children at the time the offences committed against them. PPS Assistant Director Kieran McQuillan said, "We are truly sorry to have informed all affected by this unforeseen and undetected error in the law. This development will have come as a great shock and disappointment to the victims. It will also cause uncertainty for the defendants involved. The PPS has arranged for delivery of letters to all those affected with a detailed explanation of how the situation arose and the steps we are now proposing to take. In recognition of the cross-cutting nature of this issue, we have worked together with the criminal justice partners involved to identify the scale of the problem and the actions needed to address it. We have made significant efforts to minimise the shock and upset these victims will clearly be feeling, but we will appreciate that this may be distressing news for many of them. To support them through this challenging time, we have liaised with Victim Support Northern Ireland, an independent charity which supports and advocates for victims of crime, who will be available to assist the victims should they need additional information and help. We have also arranged for Nexus NI, a charity which provides counselling for victims of sexual violence and trauma, to offer counselling support if victims wish to avail of this. We thank both organisations for their invaluable assistance." He also suggested that a fresh decision on each case will be taken within as short a time frame as possible, adding, Speaking generally, the PPS works hard alongside criminal justice partners to robustly prosecute sexual offences where the test for prosecution is met. Victims should not allow the unusual circumstances which led to this development to diminish confidence in coming forward to report their experience. Victims can continue to come forward in the knowledge that they will be treated with sensitivity and respect. Justice ministers have been called on to provide answers on the matter. 10 members of staff at the Yew Trees Hospital Mental Health Unit in Kirkby-le-Socon in Essex have been suspended after Care Quality Commission inspectors said that CCTV recordings from the hospital appeared to show episodes of physical and emotional abuse. The unannounced inspections were prompted by managers at Signet Healthcare who monitored CCTV footage of an incident on 18th of July. At the time, the 10-bed hospital held 8 adult female patients with autism or learning difficulties. 21 separate recordings were examined, which concluded that 40%, 8 recordings, showed examples of inappropriate staff behaviour towards patients. A CQC spokesperson said, "People who lived there were subjected not only to poor care, but to abuse." The investigation report said that workers were captured physically and emotionally abusing the patient and failing to use appropriate restraint techniques. They identified negative interactions where staff visibly became angry with patients and 2 cases where staff dragged patients across the floor, and that patients and others were placed at risk of harm. Abusive, disrespectful, intimidating, aggressive and inappropriate behaviour were also witnessed, and the 10 members of staff suspended, including some who witnessed the incidents but failed to report them. Dr. Kevin Cleary, the CQC's mental health lead, said the failure of some staff to raise the alarm perpetuated abuse and allowed a culture of poor care to become established. Signet's leadership made efforts to address the harm people experienced while in the care, including suspending staff and making police referrals, he said. This does not change or excuse the fact that a culture was allowed to develop at this hospital, which led to people suffering abuse. He added, "Any enforcement action we may take will be published as soon as legal restrictions allow." A spokeswoman for Signet Healthcare said, "Signet has a zero-tolerance approach to any kind of abuse, which is why the well-established policies and procedures we have in place to safeguard people in our care were backed up by the use of closed-circuit TV at Yew Trees. The safety and well-being of the people in our care is our absolute priority, and we are appalled by the actions of this small minority. We are also doing everything we can to assist the authorities to fully investigate what happened." 2 members of staff have been referred to the police, she added. Leicestershire police have found one of their constables to have committed gross misconduct, but have allowed him to keep his job. The constable, who, as transparency reigns supreme throughout police forces, has been allowed to remain anonymous, was found guilty by a misconduct panel of trying to jig an internal job interview by passing questions to a candidate for a civilian role with the force after he received the questions from a colleague. The hearing chairperson ruled proceedings should be held in private and the participants' name and ranks should not be made public, saying that this is because both are said to both work in an extremely sensitive area of policing. Instead, they were referred to as Officer A, who was accused of obtaining the questions, and Officer B, who passed them to the candidate. Extremely sensitive area of policing. Well, in that case, keeping on is clearly going to affect public's confidence in policing, which is a Sacrament Offence. After the hearing, Leicestershire Police Force issued the following statement. An officer has been issued with a final written warning after he was found to have breached the standards of professional behaviour. 2 officers appeared at the 3-day misconduct hearing, which started on Monday, September the 14th. Both officers, Officer A and Officer B, were facing an allegation that between 16th of November and 12th December 2018, they breached the standards of professional behaviour, namely honesty and integrity, challenging reporting improper conduct and discreditable conduct. It was alleged that Officer A facilitated Officer B coming into possession of interview questions in relation to an internal police staff role prior to the interview, intending that the questions would be passed on to a staff member who was a candidate for the role. This would therefore provide the staff member with an unfair advantage in the process. It was alleged Officer B was provided with the interview questions, which he then provided to a staff member who was a candidate for the role. This would have provided the staff member with an unfair advantage in the process. It was also alleged Officer B failed to challenge or report Officer A, who provided the interview questions. Following the 3-day hearing, the case against Officer A was found not to be proven. The allegations against Officer B were found to be proven. It was found that gross misconduct had been committed in regards to honesty and integrity and discreditable conduct, and that misconduct had been committed in regards to challenging reporting improper conduct. But he gets to keep his job. The IOPC are investigating a collision after a Greater Manchester unmarked police vehicle travelling at speed collided with two other vehicles, a collision which has left 2 people dead and 3 others injured. Greater Manchester Police said officers pursued a speeding car on Frederick Road, Salford, at around 11:40 p.m. on Wednesday, and that the vehicle collided with 2 other vehicles. 2 men from the pursued vehicle were pronounced dead a short time later. A man and a woman from one of the other vehicles were taken to the hospital with serious injuries. The Independent Office for Police Conduct Regional Director Amanda Rowe said, "My thoughts are with the men's families and friends after this tragic incident. When someone dies following police contact, it is mandatory for forces to make a referral to the IOPC. Our role is to establish the circumstances of the incident, and this work is already underway." The incident, understood to involve the unmarked police car, has been referred to Greater Manchester Police's Professional Standards Branch in line with normal procedure. Greater Manchester Police said no arrests have been made, which is odd, because you can sure as shit know that if it were you or I who had caused death on the road, we would have been arrested whilst being investigated. But what do you know? Blue line privilege comes out trumps yet again. You may remember when the coronavirus restrictions were amended in June to make it an offence to knock boots with your bird or boyfriend, when some charities were trying to advise people to not have sex but instead pull themselves off. Well, you might now be pleased to know, well, some of you anyway, that banging your bird or boyfriend is no longer an offence. I bet you never imagined that the government would be telling you when or if you could have sex, did you? Welcome to the New World Order. And those of you who already followed that advice are as guilty of eroding our rights as the government are. The government amended the legislation last week. Of course, they did this very quietly, which now says that people who do not live together must socially distance when they see each other unless they fall under limited exemptions, including an established relationship. However, the guidance doesn't clarify what is meant by established. In another interesting twist on the legislative changes, residents of Manchester under local lockdown rules are not allowed to meet to have sex in their homes. But if you can find a hotel not fully booked with asylum seekers, you can go to a hotel for nookie with someone who's not part of your household. Or even if it is fully booked, I'm sure you won't have any trouble finding someone at hotel's new residents who won't mind you using their room, providing they can watch. 6 in 10 idiots, Britons, went without any sexual activity during lockdown, according to researchers at Anglia Ruskin University. These latest restrictions are to be in place for 6 months, but that only means that they won't be taken away. They can be added to, as we have all seen over recent months. A pilot project being run at Helsinki Airport is underway, which is using sniffer dogs to detect people with the flu. The dog's efficiency has not been proven in comparative scientific studies, so passengers who volunteer to be tested and are suspected as carrying the virus are instructed to also take a swab to confirm the results, which, as we already know, tests have been suggested to give a 2 out of 3 false positive. In fact, Dominic Raab said in an interview with Kay Burley on Sky News,
"The challenge is that the false positive rate is very high, so only 7% of tests will be successful in identifying those that actually have the virus.
So only 7% of tests will be successful in identifying those that actually have the virus.
But still, dogs were drafted in this week to sniff and find people said to be infected with the virus. A team of 15 dogs and 10 instructors are being trained for the job in Finland by volunteers, sponsored by a private veterinary clinic. Anna Helm Bjorkman, a professor at the University of Helsinki and specialised in clinical research for companion animals, said, "What we've seen in our research is that the dogs will find the disease 5 days before the patients get any clinical symptoms. They are very good at it. We come close to 100% sensitivity. In the canine test, a passenger swipes their neck with a gauze, places it in a can, which is then handed over to another room for a dog to sniff and to deliver an immediate result." So the testing's done in private. The public won't be able to see the dog's reaction, and yet again, we are expected to simply take people's word for it. What gets me is that although sniffer dogs are great in some circumstances, they're not infallible. And many people have been falsely accused of being in possession of drugs, for example, when they have not, and simply been near somebody who has, or due to the money in their wallet being tainted with cocaine, as almost every note in circulation is. Can you imagine hitting an airport for your holiday and being told that your test come back positive, even though there is no evidence of it, even though it could be a false positive from the swab after the dog mistakenly identifies that you have it, even though more people will have coronavirus in their system, but whether it's COVID-19 is a completely different matter. I can't see this going down too well here. For me, it's another invasion of privacy. It's bad enough getting on and off a train and having a spaniel sniff my nuts for drugs after sitting on a train could easily have transferred some kind of residue onto you. Personally, I don't like this idea, but I know we have a range of opinions here on the channel, so please do let me know what you think in the comments. Kit Malthouse has been spreading his propaganda again in an attempt to recruit collaborators. Kit visited Staffordshire Police Headquarters in Western Road, Stafford, where he met with new police constables brought in as part of the force's latest recruitment drive. During his visit, he said new measures were necessary due to rising infection rates and urged the public to report any situations of major concern. You mean like rising detection rates? There's no evidence to suggest the infection rate is growing, as there's no way to quantify it, but the detection rate is certainly increasing due to increased tests being carried out. It's called the law of averages. It's like the more girls you ask for a nosh, the more chance you have of finding one to say yes without wanting you to buy her dinner first. His comments came after Chief Constable Gareth Morgan's announcement that patrols would be stepped up across the county in a bid to come down on those flouting lockdown rules. Kit Malthouse said, "We have a 101 line for people to call if they are very concerned. Thousands of people call the police every weekend to complain about noisy neighbours. Most people have great relationships with their neighbours, and perhaps at first it could be pointed out politely what the rules are." Changed your tune a bit there, haven't you, Kit? Only at the start of the week where you suggested everyone turn into grasses and call the police for practically any reason. He added, "I'm sure a lot of people will comply, but if there are situations of major concern, then the number is there if people want to use it." He said that while enforcement was necessary at times, it should only be used as a last resort. "We want to educate and encourage people to comply, and in the vast majority of cases what we are finding is that people are following the rules because they recognise the seriousness of the situation," he added. "Where they are not, then a little bit of encouragement from the police usually means that they do." He means threats. "It is only a very small number of cases that enforcement may well be warranted, with fixed penalty notices handed out. In the last lockdown, with a population of 65 million in the country, the police only handed out something like 14 to 15,000 penalty notices, which is tiny. Most people took the lockdown very seriously, and I'm very confident they will do the same this time." During his visit, Mr Malthouse spoke to new recruits who have joined the police force as part of the government's national drive to bring in 20,000 constables over a 3-year period. He praised the force for being ahead of schedule over its allocation of new officers, adding, "The fact 50% of the new recruits are female is fantastic because we want to see a good mix of young people coming through into policing. It's very energising." This concerns me. If they're ahead of schedule, then that could mean that these new recruits are being rushed through when the current training period before being given a warrant card is already frighteningly short. The new officers recruited under our plan will be directed towards refocusing on some of the violence and neighbourhood crime that plagues the streets like Stafford and elsewhere, he said. Which is also a concern for me, as 50% of the new workforce are women, and although I don't deny that some women can do far better jobs than men in some roles, I find it hard to believe that the virtual signalling police forces can seriously think that all these women they recruit are capable of handling some of the violence that is seen on the streets, which ultimately means that if a woman cop gets faced with an offender resisting, she'll hit a panic button and police from all over will have to drop what they're doing and go to assist her, leaving victims of crime in the lurch. Maybe it's just me, but I would prefer people to take the role who are capable of actually passing the tests without having to lower entry requirements or pass requirements. It seems now that restraint of a suspect training comprises of just three things: shouting stop resisting, assaulting them with one of your weapons, and pressing your panic button. Can you do those things? Yes, I can. You're hired. Now let's stick to the subject of collaborators now, which I wouldn't mind if they were being played handsomely to grass on their friends, family and neighbours. But as we see, this particular breed of collaborator is actually happy to grass without payment, which is even more dangerous than the paid kind. West Midlands Police has been inundated with 525 reports from grasses and stall pigeons across the country in just the first 6 days of the rule of 6. West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner David Jamieson said some people will choose to ignore the new measures and they should know that West Midlands Police will be on hand to remind them of their responsibilities in the first instance. But if they continue to flout the rules, then officers won't hesitate to act if lives are being put at risk. And as we already know, the police don't actually care about people's lives being at risk anyway, hence why their majority of them fail to think about that themselves when dealing with the public. This all comes after government ministers, including Kit Malthouse and Pretty Useless Patel, urged people to report their neighbours if they saw them flouting lockdown restrictions. On a plus side, however, Jamieson said it was unlikely that the army would be required to help enforce COVID regulations in the West Midlands, which comes after Boris Johnson suggested soldiers could be used to guard sites so police officers would be free to respond to calls about breaches. Jamieson said, "I think it is right that the army haven't been given extra powers and wouldn't be doing any enforcement. In truth, even if they are required, I suspect it would be a very limited role." Frightening stuff, policed by our own army, whose role is to protect us. And collaborators on every street seems to remind me of something I once heard in a history lesson. Giving the UK security forces immunity over killing people is apparently critical to national security, lawyers for the security services have said, as the push is on to introduce legislation which will give security operatives the green light to commit crimes without punishment. Previously, the security services' own guidelines gave them some implied power to authorise some crimes, but didn't mention immunity to potential action afterwards. However, the new legislation will give them that immunity. Under the legislation going before Parliament on Thursday, MI5, the police, the National Crime Agency, and other agencies that use informants or undercover agents will be able to explicitly authorise them to commit a specific crime as part of an operation. The law will require MI5 officers and others to show the crime is necessary and proportionate, however. Security officials will not say which crimes they will consider authorising because that could lead to terrorists and other serious criminals working out who is working undercover. But the legislation stresses agencies must not breach the Human Rights Act, which requires the government to protect life. Like any of the security services, including the police, care about our human rights anyway when the government's on their side to cover up any of their breaches. The new legislation will also do away with the Crown Prosecution Service reviewing the crimes committed by security service personnel, with just a senior judge alone making the decisions. Maya Foa, director of Reprieve, a legal and human rights campaign group that challenged the secrecy around the rules, said, "We are seriously concerned that the bill fails to expressly prohibit MI5 and other agencies from authorising crimes like torture, murder and sexual violence. Our intelligence agencies do a vital job in keeping this country safe, but there must be a common sense limits on their agents' activities, and we hope MPs will ensure these limits are written into the legislation. This bill isn't just for security services either, which is shocking, as not only will MI5 and other UK intelligence agencies be able to commit crimes against the people of this country with immunity, but also police forces and the National Crime Agency, which have never worried about reprisals from their crimes anyway, immigration and border officers, Majesty's Revenue and Customs and the Serious Fraud Office, UK military forces, the Ministry of Justice, investigations in prisons, Competition and Markets Authority, Environment Agency, Financial Conduct Authority, Food Standards Agency, Gambling Commission and Medicines and Healthcare Regulation Authority. Just why the hell the Food Standards Agency, the FCA or Medicines and Healthcare Regulation Authority need to commit crimes against the public is beyond me, and quite frankly, what appears to be an attempt to simply safeguard all government agencies, regardless of their roles, from public prosecution for any wrongdoing. Now, if this doesn't worry you, then your head must be buried so far in the sand. This is a dangerous precedent, giving all of the government agencies immunity from prosecution, ultimately without any independent oversight body to regulate and control their behaviours. Shocking stuff, but I'm sure not the last we will see or hear of the New World Order and their ever-tightening restrictions and their ever-pushing agenda to deliberately destroy the democratic procedures that hold them all to account. This week, police in Wales were conducting checkpoints around Newport and the border crossing into Cardiff in what the police are calling an engagement process. Don't know about you, but I wouldn't get engaged with the police even if you paid me. In fact, I wouldn't even finger one for a laugh. Police stop checks were set up in Bristol on March 24th, the very first day lockdown was announced, with motorists being stopped and spoken to in Park Street. But after the first day, Avon Somerset police just couldn't be bothered to carry on this side of the channel. A bit like how they deal with most incidents then. All enthusiastic on day one, but when they realise just how much work's involved, they sack it off. Newport, just 30 miles by road from Bristol, is now the subject of a local lockdown that began on Tuesday, September 22nd, and police have been running their checkpoints and have stopped more than 80 cars a day at various locations. On Tuesday, Gwent police said they were carrying out roadside checks on the A48, which connects Newport to Cardiff, close to the border between the two cities. A Force spokesperson there said the idea wasn't to check up on people, but to talk to them to explain the local lockdown. Bullshit! Sorry. Officers will be out in the community engaging and encouraging everyone to follow local restrictions which are in place, he said. Really? Do they really think we're that stupid? Since when has it been the police's job to tell us about the lockdown restrictions when not a single police force in the country can understand it themselves? They added, we'll be conducting roadside vehicle checks on major and minor arterial routes to explain and engage with the public about the importance of following Welsh Government COVID restrictions. Did you notice anything there about that statement? Conducting roadside vehicle checks to explain and engage with the public about the importance of following Welsh Government COVID restrictions. How does a little chat about the restrictions require a roadside vehicle check? Now, granted, the police can stop you for any reason, providing they are in uniform under 163 of the Road Traffic Act. They can also require you to produce your driving licence and, in some cases, your date of birth under 164. And under 165 of the Road Traffic Act, they can require you to provide details of the driver and others, for example, the owner of the vehicle. But nowhere in the Road Traffic Act, which is the only act that gives them permission to stop you without cause, does it state that you have to physically speak to them or even to listen to them. Now, I'm not suggesting you should do the following, but I, for one, would simply roll up my window if they started trying to preach to me about the restrictions. They know nothing about themselves. I'd happily listen to their sales pitch, asking for my details, which I would simply provide by way of showing my licence through the window. I would speak to them if I had to tell them I didn't have my details on me, and let them know I'm happy to take my licence into a local police station. But other than that, they'd get nothing from me. And as it's not in the law to engage with the police, I wouldn't. It's also important to note that unless you're being detained or arrested, you have zero obligation to exit your vehicle, although they are trying to get that legislation changed. Yet another publicly elected official who spends their time ordering us to follow guidance, failing to follow it themselves. DUP MP Sammy Wilson was spotted on the London Underground reading a paper whilst completely neglecting the rules for travelling in public transport. The image, which appeared on social media on Thursday, showed the DUP MP travelling to Heathrow from Westminster. A witness claimed that Wilson did not wear a mask for the entirety of his journey. In response to the image, Wilson said he accepts he should have been wearing one and that he would accept whatever consequences there are. He said, "I've accepted that I wasn't wearing a mask. I should have been. I'm making no excuses and will accept whatever consequences there are." DUP leader Arlene Foster said everyone is subject to the law and everyone is equal under the law. If only that was true. Therefore, it is very important that we listen to the laws and abide by them, she said. Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill said she had heard about the incident and the executive was strongly encouraging people to wear masks. The DUP MP told the Belfast Telegraph newspaper, "I wore a mask before getting on the train, while on the train, in the airport and on the plane. I took a call and you can't talk through a mask as you are muffled. So I took it off, but put it back on again soon after." He said there were others in the carriage not wearing a mask. It wasn't just me, there was others doing it too. Pathetic. Transport for London says those caught not wearing a mask could face a minimum fine of £200, which doubles each time a person is caught, up to £6,400. Exemptions apply for age, health and disability reasons, and Transport for London provides an exemption card for those unable to wear one. The witness said he had been contacted by the Met Police, who said they had passed on the case to the British Transport Police. The British Transport Police spokesperson said face coverings are a mandatory requirement on public transport. If officers are on patrol and see someone not wearing a face covering on a train or at the station, we will begin by engaging with them and reminding them of the reasons why the protections are a necessary and lawful requirement. In these cases, the overwhelming majority of people will listen and comply without the need for enforcement. In other cases, passengers may have a reasonable excuse or a valid exemption from wearing a face covering. Now, after the shooting of a police custody sergeant in Croydon, which resulted in his death, some of the mainstream media have decided to take this opportunity to remind us all just how dangerous a job being a copper is, by publishing the police who have died in the line of duty over the past 10 years. Andrew Harper, who died in 2019, was killed as 3 teenagers fled the scene when he responded to the reported theft of a quad bike from a home near a village in Berkshire on August 2019 after he got his foot caught in a tow rope trailing out the back of their vehicle. Keith Palmer, who died in 2017, was stabbed to death at the gates of the Palace of Westminster when he confronted terrorist Khalid Massoud on the 22nd of March 2017, while the then Scotland Yard Deputy Commissioner locked himself in his car just metres away. David Phillips, who died in 2015, died during a high-speed police pursuit in October 2015 when the suspect ran him over. Kirsty Nellis, who died in 2013, died in a police helicopter crash in Glasgow in November 2013. She was one of 3 people in the helicopter who died, along with civilian pilot David Trail. Tony Collins, who died in 2013, was killed in the same helicopter crash as PC Kirsty Nellis. Andrew Duncan died in 2013. 47-year-old was hit and killed by a car in Sutton, South London. PC Duncan had been checking vehicle speeds and had asked the car to stop. Philippa Reynolds died in 2013. She was killed by 2 men driving a stolen car after they crashed into her police vehicle in Londonderry on February 2013. Andrew Brammer, 2013, died after he lost control of his van on a country road when responding to a 999 call. Nicola Hughes died in 2012. A 23-year-old was one of 2 police killed in a gun and grenade attack as they investigated a hoax burglary in Greater Manchester. Fiona Bone was killed in the same attack as Nicola Hughes in Mottram, Tameside on the 18th of September. Ian Dibble died in 2012. A 41-year-old was shot and killed in Clacton-on-Sea after he intervened in a dispute near his home whilst off duty. Now, the more astute of you will have noticed that some of those deaths were not actually through assault or murder, but were in fact the result of horrific accidents. Harper, for example, was killed after his foot got caught in a crane strap as the thieves made off in a vehicle. Kirsty Nellis and Tony Collins died in a helicopter crash. Andrew Brammer was killed when he lost control of a van he was driving. So if we take those away from the 11, we're left with 8 deaths of police officers over the past 10 years. Hardly enough to really warrant a change in law to protect them, especially when you consider that over the same time frame there has been 27 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2010, 33 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2011, 25 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2012, 32 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2013, 32 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2014, 37 deaths in or following contact with police in 2015, 48 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2016, 54 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2017, 43 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2018, 37 deaths in or following contact with the police in 2019, and so far this year we have already seen 25 deaths in or following contact with the police. That's a current running total so far of 393 members of the public, compared to 8 police constables. Anyone else see something wrong here? I think it's important for people to see the bigger picture and stop focusing on the poor police. Yes, they have a tough job to do. But do we ever see the police trying to de-escalate situations anymore? Do we ever see the police not immediately going for their weapons? Do we ever see the police not shitting themselves and pressing their panic button so the suspect ends up with a dozen plods, twisting them up, assaulting them, and in some cases causing their deaths? I don't believe anyone should have their life taken from them unless it's a pedo. But come on people, open your eyes and see this for what it is. This is a controlled plot to make the police untouchable under law for their mistakes and their abuses whilst punishing the public more and more in a bid for control. And it has nothing to do with terrorism before people start on that rubbish. If the police genuinely believed they were at risk of terrorists, if they genuinely feared terrorists, they wouldn't be wasting their time on those specific powers in order to teach people a lesson for public photography, for instance. So tell me, who's more at risk, them or us? 41-year-old West Mercia Police Constable Gary Brennan, who couldn't fit in, has appeared at Shrewsbury Crown Court. Brennan pleaded guilty to 2 counts of misconduct in public office relating to the incidents which happened whilst he was based at Marlinsgate Police Station. The charges relate to text messages sent to 2 women that he met during the course of his work, including sending one woman, described as a fragile woman, intimate images and use of the police national computer to track their contact details from 2007 to 2018. Brennan was in the police for 17 years. Yeah, he really didn't fit in, did he? No one stays in a job for 17 years if they don't fit in. But he, of course, resigned when the incidents came to light 2 years ago. Sentencing him at Shrewsbury Crown Court, Judge Peter Barry told Brennan that he was troubled by him accessing the police national computer to research information about the women. The database has a great deal of confidential information. Police officers have an absolute and fundamental duty to respect that confidence. It undermines trust in the force when the public find that the police officer for personal purposes made use of that material. The judge also said it is clear from what she said that she was a fragile state of mental health. She expressed that it caused her harm over the years. Well, what do you expect? Many of the police are narcissists and thrive on having power over people in their work life and their personal life. The judge continued, after much visible hesitation, my conclusions are these. If you had been convicted by a jury in prompt proceedings, the shortest sentence you could have received would have been 12 months imprisonment. You are entitled to 1/3 credit for your guilty plea. I am just persuaded by a range of circumstances. If I had been dealing with this a year ago, it would have undoubtedly been different. Mitigating for Brennan, Mr. Nicholas Walkers asked the court to take into account the defendant's guilty plea, the 2-year delay before the case was brought before the courts, his resignation, and his personal circumstances. Brennan of Elderberry Close, The Rock in Telford, was sentenced to a total of 8 months in prison, suspended for 18 months. He must attend 35 rehabilitation days and carry out 120 hours unpaid work. He was also made subject to an indefinite restraining order preventing him from contacting one of the complainants in any way. Now, isn't it funny how whenever we hear about a copper in court, they are never charged under Section 26 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, which, when a police constable exercises the powers and privileges of constable improperly and knows or ought to know that the exercise is improper, which gives a term of imprisonment on conviction of indictment of up to 14 years and or a fine. Even the most serious cases we've discussed here on PAP Reports, we're still yet to hear of a copper being charged under that piece of legislation. 40-year veteran of the police force, 58-year-old Marc Winter, described as a highly decorated former police inspector with an exemplary career behind him, has been spared jail on the basis that he used to be part of the Blue Line gang. Winter appeared at Newcastle Crown Court charged with leaving his wife with bleeding on the brain after he attacked her with a Prosecco bottle. Winter, who served with Northumbria Police for 23 years and Leicestershire Police before that, pleaded guilty to causing unlawful wounding, but the judge at Newcastle Crown Court said only his career as a police officer, which ended in 2016, saved him from going immediately to prison. Mrs. Winter said in a victim impact statement that her life had changed considerably following the attack by the person she loved and trusted, and was still suffering pain from her injuries months later, and had lost some hair. She said she was suffering headaches, fatigue, insomnia and dizziness, and was unable to drive for 6 months due to her injuries. Mrs. Winter added, I can't believe my husband could do this to me after 15 years. The court heard the couple, who were no longer together, had been partners for approaching 15 years, were married for the last 4 and lived in Whitley Bay. On August the 23rd last year, they went to a local pub around 5:30 p.m. and left around 10, stopping on their way home to buy a bottle of Prosecco and some food. When they got home, they were watching TV and Winter brought up the subject of some marital difficulties they were having, which Mrs. Winter did not want to discuss. She said Winter would not let it drop, and she tried ignoring him. In a statement describing what happened, Mrs. Winter said the empty or almost empty bottle of Prosecco was on the coffee table in front of the sofa. She said, "I suddenly felt a hard blow to the right side of my head. He was then over me and I felt 4 or 5 blows across my head." Mrs. Winter said they felt like full force blows and she saw he was using the bottle to hit her. Winter told her, "This is the only way this is going to end." Mrs. Winter added it was like he just lost it for a couple of minutes. He let her get up, but then blocked her from getting out of the front door. Mrs. Winter, bleeding from a head wound, struggled with her husband to try and get out and cried for help from neighbours. She eventually got out with nothing on her feet, but was unable to rouse any neighbours for help. She made it back to the pub where she collapsed on the floor, losing consciousness twice, and paramedics arrived to take her to hospital. Ian West, prosecuting, said her hair was covered in blood and stuck together and a CT scan revealed bleeding on the surface of her brain. She also had grazes to her head. When Winter was arrested, he claimed, "I've been hit over the head with a glass," and acted in self-defence. In police interview, he declined to answer any questions. Winter of Whitley Bay pleaded guilty to unlawful wounding and was sentenced to 2 years, suspended, and must do 120 hours unpaid work. Judge Amanda Rippon told Winter, "You were protecting and serving the public for going on 4 decades, and this is an ignominious end to what was a character properly described as not just good but exemplary. Instead of protecting, you injured. Instead of serving, you harmed." Which surely makes the offence all the worse. Would you not agree, Judge Rippon? She said, "I need to make it clear this is an exceptional course I'm taking because when a husband picks up a bottle and hits his wife over the head multiple times, they generally go straight to prison. The only reason I've told you I would not send you to prison is because of the life you led up until August last year." Now, I don't care who the hell you are. As a member of the public, it's almost guaranteed you're going down for an assault of that calibre, no matter what you did before. And the police and court system wonder why the trust in the system has bottomed out. Collaborators have been seen in London this week after a bunch of immoral twants were seen searching for COVID rule breakers by visiting pubs and looking through people's letterboxes. The team of collaborators hired by Westminster Council was seen in Soho in central London, although they said they were checking venues. Well, this looks more like a doorway to the flat above such a venue. Dan Barker spotted the inspectors and uploaded photos of them to Twitter. He wrote, strange sight, city inspectors working through Soho, looking for illegal speakeasies, open after the 10 p.m. cut-off. He told Yahoo UK, "I'd guess I'd saw them looking into a dozen or so places. The area has quite a lot of bars and pubs." Now, if it is just businesses, then I'm not entirely sure the ramifications on people's human rights and their right to privacy, especially if entry has been shut and the doors are locked. But seeing as households are now banned from mixing indoors, how long do you think it will be before COVID marshals are wandering down your street, trying to peer through your windows and letterbox? This is, in my opinion, a big step to normalising the collaborators who will be out in force grasping people up before they take steps to check up on us while we're at home. I, for one, am leaving a pointy stick by my front door in case I see any twant peeking through my letterbox. Very big thank you to the channel supporters, one and all, especially the channel patron supporters. Of course, your support is truly appreciated. And that is all I have for you today. Please like, please share, please comment and please subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police, film other officials, and have a great weekend. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.